Every webinar, we call experts from different domains to discuss and examine opinions, issues, problems, and perspectives. Each webinar is an interactive session where we all walk away with more respect for each other and a deeper understanding of the topic at hand. If you miss a session, please visit our website or YouTube channel for a full library of past WishwaTalks on many such interesting topics. Today on WishwaTalks, our speaker is Ms. Pujita Krishna, Artistic Director from Feet on Earth, and she will lead us through this session in just a few moments. Pujita Krishna is a multi-talented artist with a passion for dance and media. She has an MFA in dance from the University of California, Irvine. She's a practitioner of Vilasini Natyam and Kuchipudi and also innovates movement while creating independent original works. Her journey in the world of media includes roles as an anchor, presenter, actor, and a voiceover artist. She has graced prestigious stages worldwide, captivating audiences with her mesmerizing performances and won several awards. As a mentor, she founded Feet on Earth, a dance space nurturing young talents. Her creative endeavors fuse tradition with contemporary elements, showcasing her artistic brilliance. Before we get started, I'd like to inform our audience that our speaker will be taking questions from you after our main talk. So please leave your questions in the chat or use the raise hand option and we will allow you to ask your question in person. I request everyone to turn on your webcam while interacting with the speaker. Now, without further ado, I invite our speaker to begin today's WishwaTalk. Good morning, ma'am. Just a second. Good morning again.
Namaste, good morning. Yes. Thank you, Prashant, for that very gracious introduction. I would like to thank at the outset the entire team at WishwaTalks for giving me this opportunity and also welcoming all the participants, listeners who are here today. So thank you. And let's get started. I have a visual, an PPT, so that should help us through the, So the topic for today is dance as a ritual, Indic and global perspectives or examples from India and rest of the world. The reason I chose to speak on this is because our perception of dance in the current times, modern days, is that it is a medium only for entertainment and visual gratification. And unfortunately, that's what it's been reduced to. So we look at dance as something that I should look at and be, entertained by, or I dance myself and I dance for my own recreation and for my own entertainment. So that's a very simplistic understanding of dance, which is probably one aspect, but the point of this doing this talk is to give you an insight, a peek into a world of dance as a conduit, as a medium for performing very serious and solemn rituals, and a tradition that just is not limited to India, but actually extended across the globe. In the interest of full disclosure, I'd like to say that I'm not approaching the subject as an academician. I'm looking at it as an independent researcher, as a performer, as someone who's interested in the subject. So it is by no means a PhD thesis. It is just a work in progress, and I'm still learning a lot about it because it's such an extensive subject. So let's move on to the next slide. Let's unpack the terms, right? What is, like I said, objectives of the talk. I've already told you why I think it's important. It's important to know, how widespread it was and continues to be, and how different cultures employ dance as a ritual performance, and how does dance lend itself to worship, prayer, and ritual. So that's also important. Why? And finally, and most importantly for me, the Indic perspective on what makes dance an important part of ritual. Next. Next slide, please. So let's unpack the terms first. What is a ritual? So according to the Oxford Dictionary, rituals are a series of actions that are always performed in the same way, especially as part of a ceremony. Here I've used the word religious, but obviously there is some amount of ceremonialness or solemnness attached to it. And so it is a series of action. It always has to be in the same way. So you can't do it in a particular way one time and then, change it the next and then change it another time that you do it. So it has got to be in the exact same way. And the origins of the word can be traced back to the Sanskrit term Rita, which is a very important concept in the dharmic worldview, or the cosmic. Rita is the principle that governs the cosmic order. It governs everything, that is the goodness of everything. So there is that principle of Rita that is controlling the whole and keeping that balance and that equilibrium. So features of a ritual would be, customary practice or a series of action, like I said, done in a prescribed fashion for a particular result. So it's always for a desired result. There has to be a purpose involved. And the idea of a cosmic law can be found in many cultures, not just in India, many faiths, especially the pre-Abrahamic faiths across the world. The word Rita, in fact, comes from the root ri, which means to move or to go or rise. And that fits in perfectly with the idea of dance or movement. In Greece, for example, in the Greek language, you have a word which is, oraia, which is actually quite similar to the concept of Rita, which means the proper way or the good way. Of course, the Greek culture is greatly influenced by the Indic culture. Now, dance, let's move on to the definition of dance. I've chosen a definition given by Joanne Chialini Homopu, who was a very famous dance anthropologist. And she says, dance is a transient mode of expression because it doesn't stay. You can't capture it. I mean, through camera, yes, but it changes, right? It's ephemeral. Performed in a given form and style by the human body, moving in space. So there is space and there is the element of time. Dance occurs through purposefully selected and controlled rhythmic movements. The resulting phenomenon is recognized as dance both by the performer and the observing members of a given group. So you could do whatever with your arms and imagine it to be dance, but hey, the person who's watching, you should also think of it as dance. So both people, the participant, the dancer, as well as the one who's watching, must recognize it as dance. Next. The antiquity of dance, of course, is, you can't put a date to it, but it is pretty old as life itself. And it was practiced in societies far back as, in the prehistoric times. The earliest evidence of dance is at least 9,000 years back, which can be found in the cave paintings of Bhimbetka and Madhya Pradesh in our country. We have some Egyptian paintings too from way back. Cave paintings, and of course this is a famous picture of the the famous figurine of the dancing girl from Mohenjo-daro. Much has been said about this dancing girl. So, and this is dated to be around 2300 to 1750 BC. So if obviously dance predates this figure. Next. Now there are various types of dance rituals, many kinds. I've listed a few here, like fertility dance ritual, hunting dance ritual, harvest dance ritual, wedding dance ceremony rituals, religious, which of course is processional, exorcism dance rituals, birthing dance rituals, and healing dance rituals. Yeah. Okay, I've got this pop quiz, but we'll get to this probably. Let's move to the next slide. If we have time, we'll come back to pop quiz. Just a teaser to test how much people know about, the lay person knows about dance. Common features of ritual dances. Someone says sound, please. I don't know. I hope my audio.
Let us do that. Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, so common features of ritual dances. They are usually communal in nature and performed as a group. There are exceptions, but primarily it's a group, communal in nature. Performed in the presence of a priest, deity, a symbol, or a king. The movements are known to everyone and usually follow a prescribed format. Like I said, it's always prescriptive. Everybody knows what needs to be done, and they all do it exactly in the prescribed fashion. Movements are simple and repetitive, so there's no complex choreography. There's no complex choreography in a ritual. Okay. There seems to be some problem with the sound. I'll try turning off the fan. Let me just try that. Just give me a second. Okay, so that's the best I can do. I've turned the fan off, so I hope the sound is
It's absolutely fine. It's I think it's for some people it's not proper.
okay.
Yeah.
All right. So moving on, the movements are simple and repetitive. So there's no complex choreography in a dance ritual, right? It's the idea is to keep it simple and repetitive. It keeps repeating. Most follow a pattern or a motif, like circle. Circle is very, very big in ritual dances, if you noticed. Clapping of hands, wearing of masks. A lot of ritual dances involve wearing of masks. And of course, there's an inducement of trances. There's a lot of, like I said, we'll get to that inducement of trance in a ritual performance. The predictability of the repetitive patterns and steps in a dance ritual allows for the why is it so? Why is it repetitive? Why is it predictable? Well, obviously, the reason is that it allows the mind to be free and focus on the purpose of the ritual. So you can't be thinking, okay, right leg forward, left leg back, right hand up, pinky out. You can't be thinking about all these things while you're doing a ritual. The idea is to keep it very simple, predictable, and so the mind is focused only on the purpose. Remember, I said a ritual always is purpose driven. Most of the times, these rituals are imitative of nature, like the walk or gait of an animal, or even simple everyday acts like churning of butter, tilling of land, etc. So a lot of these movements are actually drawn from nature itself. Moving on, next slide. Now, there are several myths about origin of dance, and I'm not going to obviously get into different myths, but I've just taken two for, just so that we can, look at it briefly. Of course, the Indian, and I've used the word myth. I know a lot of people may have objection to it. These are, for want of a better word, I've used the word myth, but it could be for a lot of people the actual history. A lot of people think that it is connected to the history of the land. So these are stories which are to do with the origin of dance. So I've picked one which is to do with our own stories, our story about the origin of dance, which is those who are dancers are definitely familiar with this, but those who are not. According to the Indic belief system, dance began as a result of the turmoil between Asuras and Devas. And the Devas, approached Indra for some means of entertainment or relief. Again, entertainment for want of a better word, but some kind of reprieve from the strife, this ongoing strife between good and bad. And Indra approaches Brahma. Brahma then comes up with what is known as the Natya Veda, where he takes elements from all four Vedas and then comes out with this Natya Veda, comes up with a compilation of the Natya Veda. And this is then handed over to sage Bharata. Vishwakarma was hired to design the very first auditorium, and the very first play which was chosen to be performed was that of Amrita Manthana. Shiva was asked to be the first, member of the audience to kind of give his approval, and he suggested, well, everything is great, but what it's missing is, abstract movement, right? And that's how dance or just plain nritta was included in the play. So it began as natya with elements of nritta in it, and of course Shiva then enjoined his disciple Tandu, sage Tandu, to teach it to Bharata. Bharata Muni is believed to have been the author of the Natya Shastra. So the dance which was taught by Tandu included the 108 karanas, poses, movements like rechakas, etc., which are mentioned in the Natya Shastra exhaustively and can be seen in Chidambaram and such temples. The another myth is very briefly, I've put it here, is the Dogon tribe in Mali believed that God's son, Jackal, danced and told divine secrets of the world in dust. And a spirit later taught these in the form of dance, to dance. Next. So there are many such myths. I have only chosen two here. These are, this is a picture here of, the various karanas. I mean, I've pulled this out of the web. Okay, so let's look at some of the dancing rituals. Belly dancing. This is an example of a birthing ritual. Many people may or may not be aware. So it has been called many things. It was called dance du ventre. Ventre is the stomach. Dance as dance. Dance of the stomach, for example, and it is a prime example of a dance form that has become highly sexualized or eroticized in the popular imagination. But people don't realize that in fact, the origins of belly dancing is as prosaic as it can be and had nothing to do with the gratification of the male gaze. That's what it's believed. A lot of researchers have said that it was in fact a highly secretive ritual which was performed only by the women, obviously as part of labor, inducing labor, and men weren't allowed to watch the ritual. The purpose was to make the to-be mother, imitate the pelvic and abdominal movements, and kind of help her with the process of labor, so that delivery would be easy. So no one would think that what it has become now, actually it began as something which had to do with ritual actually, and it had only women involved in it. And it's not just in this is in Bedouin and Berber women. This is North Africa, which is currently Morocco and those parts of Africa, and that's why there's a lot of French influence, because these were French colonies, and that's how it got exported to the other parts of the world. Similar birthing rituals can also be found among the Hawaiians and Maoris, so it's not restricted only to Morocco. Next. This here is a picture of belly dancing. Of course, there are many versions, and belly dancing has undergone so many changes as it traveled through the world. Middle East, when it came to Iran, it came to Egypt, it came to other parts of the world. It has undergone, and of course, the West has completely taken it and made it something else. And then now you have fertility dance rituals. So I've taken the example of a tribe from Tanzania, who call the Sandwe people, and they're different. So there are many tribes again in Africa, and of course Africa is a continent. We often forget, we think of Africa as a country. It's a continent, so there are many different types of peoples, and they're all distinct from each other. So this is from Tanzania. There is a group of people called the Sandwe people, and they perform a fertility ritual called the Fikumu, which is actually an imitation of the sexual congress, the sex act. And often this is performed after sunset as an ode to the moon as a deity of both creativity and destruction. So how interesting, the parallels with the Indic culture too, because moon, even in the Indic culture, is viewed as something that is responsible for creative flights of imagination and so on and so forth. So this highly erotic dance is danced by both men and women, where women employ various gestures that seem to represent the moon. The act of congress is supposed to simulate the idea of a similar congress between the sun, which represents the men, and moon, which represents the women. So they think that for them, the raison d'etre behind the universe is the congress between, or the coming together of the sun and the moon, right? Because the sun then disappears into the horizon and the moon appears. So it's kind of like, for them, it's like a coming together of the sun and the moon. A similar dance was, now I come to fertility ritual to do with puberty. So similar dance was performed for young girls who attain puberty, called the eland bull dance. Eland is a type of a antelope. It looks like a huge, like a cow, but it's an antelope. It's the eland bull, the male eland bull dance of the Bushmen. This practiced by the Bushmen of northwestern regions of Africa, used to be. This practice, celebrating a girl reaching monarch, was widely practiced. So this practice is not, I'm just trying to say that it's not just one part. It is actually something that was done in different parts of the world. And it was tied up with interestingly, with many people, again, may or may not be aware, but the monarch is actually tied up with the waxing and waning of the moon. So in the olden days, it was believed, and it is still believed by those who still practice those menstrual, practices, that it is intimately connected with the waxing and waning. That is a 28-day cycle. So it was, connects up with the moon cycle. In the olden days, people actually, villages, communities around the world had menstrual huts, where people would actually, women who were menstruating would retire to the menstrual hut, and everybody, all the women would have it at the same time, because it connects up to the cycle of the moon. Okay, next. This is a picture of the Sandwe people from Tanzania. Yeah. So trance dances. Now let's look at how dance through trance works as a ritual. So this is usually used for exorcism and healing rituals. I've chosen the example of Stambali, which is an exorcism dance ritual, which was performed by Tunisian Jews. Tunisia is also a part of Africa, again, North Africa. And it is believed that the first Jews who came to Tunisia came during Solomon's time, King Solomon's time. And of course, eventually most of them left for Israel. The Sambali dance is a trance ritual which is accompanied with solemn musical ceremony. So there is, of course, has to be intimately connected with music. The trance is usually induced with dance and is only performed or danced by women who are suffering from some sort of psychic illness. So it's kind of considered to be psychotherapy of some sort. And believed to have been, this psychic illness was believed to have been brought on by demonic possession. Similarly, you have an example of such practices in Morocco, where again you have trances which are induced by performances of dance and music, like the Hamadsha, Gnawa. And the interesting thing about these trance rituals is they're not afflictive or healing. They're not supposed to cure you of the demonic possession, but in fact to commune with the spirits. The dance, which is not, it's not particularly coordinated, but it can also become highly eroticized. And these rituals, of course, now that Morocco is an Islamic state, it's frowned upon. Then you have something in Egypt also called the Zar, which is believed to be an import from Sudan. A country like Sri Lanka has trance rituals too, which are a product of Hindu and Buddhist syncretic culture. So, for example, you have the Kandya dance, which is practiced to break or used to be practiced to break the magic spell on the king, who was believed to have been bewitched by spirits called yakas. So these are, I've just picked a few. There are many, even in India, we have many such rituals. Next. So this here is some pictures of the Stambali, the variations of it. And of course, as you know, through the ages, there've been variations of it, there are different forms of it, etc. So it's not like uniform. The movement may be the same, the practices may be the same, but there may be few changes here and there. So we come to the Middle Ages, where I just chose to speak about this because most people don't know. It's a very interesting phenomenon that happened in the Middle Ages in Europe, especially in France and Germany. So the dance has been, dance has many associations with altered state of consciousness. So especially when we talk about trances, there is an altered state. And this connection of dance movement with an altered state of consciousness can be seen, especially in the trance rituals, which I've spoken of, which are used for curing or healing or getting rid of demons or spirits, etc. This inherent nature of dance, saw a period of frenzied dancing. So this quality of dance brought about a frenzied state of dancing, which led to several deaths, and people actually died as a result of exhaustion of dancing over days and days, interestingly. And this period of dancing mania was actually seen among the Christian population residing in parts of, like I said, France and Germany. And there were several outbreaks of this epidemic. It was considered an epidemic which broke out between the 13th and the 17th centuries in these particular parts of Europe. This region was mainly around the Rhine Valley, and it saw two main spurts, 1374 and 1519. In the latter, many thousands died screaming salvation, saying the word salvation. People believed that the dancing frenzy was caused by a curse of Saint Vitus, and the people believed that by dancing, they were seeking salvation from the saint. You can still see some of these, kind of movements and, dancing, kind of like dancing and then falling in a lot of Christian communes even today. So here's a picture of the dancing mania in Europe, where people are just dancing, and for days together on end. Next. So let's look at the relationship between Christianity and dance, and if dance was used in Christianity as a ritual. Yes, it was, interestingly enough. In the early years of Christianity, the religion was in the thrall of its Greco-Roman predecessors. Obviously, we all know, I hope people know, that historically Christianity took roots from, obviously, took over from its Greek and Roman cultures. So in the initial years, it was still under the influence of those cultures. And so it continued to draw from those cultures, practices that came from the ancient Greek and Roman cultures. It's continued to draw from there. So it was highly ritualistic. Early Christianity was popular, contrary to what popular notion is. It was highly ritualistic in nature. So dance was in fact used, a lot as festal dances, processional dances, choral dances. And in the initial days, this was segregated. So the genders were not mixed. Even in the church, there were dividers, you couldn't mix. So dance was segregated, and they were dancing in the church, which was often led by the bishops or the deacons themselves. But at some point, it is believed that dance began to get integrated, as in the genders, the sexes began to mix. And it became, over a period of time, interestingly, very ribald, as in very vulgar, unbridled, right? Very open. And because of the mixing of the sexes, and it ceased being segregated as it was in the initial days. So in the initial days, the dancing was led by what were called, the bishops were called praesens. And there was a practice of dancing even in the tombs of martyrs, you see. In places like France, this tradition continued in Catholic countries like France, because England, as you all know, became Protestant, Anglican, I think Protestant after the 15th century or so. But this practice continued in France. And despite edicts being passed against it. So after a while, it became, the church, there were elements of people within the church who started opposing it, but the practice continued. In Limoges, which is a place in France, the deacons danced after Vespers, which is the evening prayers, and a dance called Bergeret used to be danced at the Church of Mary Magdalene in Besançon. Next. There's a picture of Salome. I don't know if you're familiar with the story of Salome. It's a very interesting story, I think, in the Old Testament. And some amount of maybe choreophobia, as it's called, the hatred or dislike of dancing within Christianity, is attributed to Salome's story, which is, we can go on to the next slide, where Salome is believed to have seduced King Herod, through her dance of the 7 veils, and which ultimately leads to his death. So the early Christians embraced dance as a form of imitation. So in the early years, like I said, the Christians were still influenced by the Greek and Roman predecessors. And what were the Greeks believe? They believed that dance was in fact imitative of the harmony or the perfection of gods. So the harmony of the world was to be found in the gods themselves, and dance in fact mimicked that. So that was their belief. And that also saw a little bit of that element the Christians adopted, because they believed that dancing was a kind of expression of joy, expression of expressing their gratitude and humility to God. That was the early belief. And they believed that dance was a form of imitation of the angels. Eventually, though, the idea of anything corporeal, that anything to do with the body, became, and because of dancing, there was a possible corruption of the soul as a result of erotic sentiments, caused a lot of people to get uncomfortable, the church authorities to get uncomfortable with dancing, because like I said, it started to get integrated and mixed. So there were a lot of edicts, a lot of prohibitions against dancing. And primarily, 2 people who were behind this was Saint Augustine and John Chrysostom. Like I said, the objection could have been because dancing became more secular and more unrestrained in nature. So, like I said, Salome and her story perhaps also had something to do with this fear of dance. Next. We come to India. There are many. There are hundreds and if not thousands of dances in India. So I'm not going to beyond the scope of this talk to talk about everything, but I'm going to talk about just few aspects and one or two examples. The culture of dance is varied in India. We all know that, and I have said that if there's evidence of dancing that can be traced back 9,000 years. In Bhimbetka caves where we have paintings, and then of course there's mention of dance in in our Puranas, in our Ramayana and Mahabharata. So there's a lot of instances of mention of dance in our treatises and texts and itihasa. And the Natya Shastra is obviously a very comprehensive and believed to be the tome from which everything about dance has originated. And it is believed to have been written or authored anywhere between 200 BC to 200 AD. I'm no expert, but that's the time frame that has been given. But I don't think conclusively anyone has been able to point to a date. And if Bharata Muni is believed to have written it, but a lot of people say it's been compiled. So a lot of information in India about these texts is always a little in debate because it's difficult and impossible when something is so ancient and going back to such a historic, so far back in time to give a accurate date to it. So this is the most authoritative text, definitely, arguably the most authoritative text on dance. And there have been many which have been written on dance since, and specifically on dance. Whereas Natya Shastra, please remember, is on Natya, which is the primary focus is on Natya, which is drama. A good example of a text which was authored specifically on dance is Nritya Ratnavali by Jayappa Senapati, which is from the Telangana region. And so dance has been dance has been documented, delineated, described in several texts, right? So there are two basic forms, which is Margi and Desi. Margi is stylized, codified, and then Desi is the more, what for want of a better term, we call folk traditions. They're not codified. And ritual dances exist within the realm of both Desi and Margi. And the presence of a highly sophisticated system of Abhinaya is considered to be the pinnacle of high art and a distinguishing characteristic of Indian dance traditions. Abhinaya is expressive art. Next. So I'm going to talk about Bonalu and Potharaju for today's, as an example for today's, discussion on ritual dance. So we just had a Bonalu recently. We celebrated Bonalu recently, and this is usually celebrated in the month of June, July, Ashadam, and the main tradition is you have, of course, the Joginis, who are the women, the female ritualists, but you also have the male ritualist, who's Potharaju, who is believed to be the brother of Mahankali. And there's a main temple, Ujjaini Mahankali in Secunderabad, and he's the protector of the seven sisters, who are all Grama Devatas. And this continues to this day. This ritual performer, Potharaju, usually belongs to a hereditary family. So it can't be that you select somebody randomly. Usually it has to be somebody who comes from that family. He's claimed. There has to be some signs. He has to be marked for that, playing that role, and is appointed by the temple authorities to be Potharaju for that year or that day. And women, of course, we know what Bonalu is. I'm sure women from Telangana know what that is, carrying food for the goddess. And there are huge processions accompany Potharaju as he makes his way to the temple, all the while dancing, whipping himself, and he carries this whip, right? And to be whipped by him is considered to be a blessing. Potharaju is believed to be a form of Vishnu. And he has to wear bells. So remember, bells are very important. Why would he wear bells if there's no element of movement in it? So definitely there is some movement, there is rhythm, and there are drums. There is a marked modernization of music and dancing today, which is associated with all these rituals, unfortunately. The Teenmar, there's a lot of DJ music these days. Well, that's the commercialization that has come about. It has become highly popular. Bonalu festivities have become extremely popular, which is a good thing, but there's a bit of a negative side to it too, but I'm not going to discuss that today. So the ritual also includes a process called Rangam, where a female oracle becomes possessed. So very similar to the trances that we spoke about, the Stambali and the other rituals that we spoke about just a few minutes ago. And dances in a trance. She also gets into a trance-like state. And as an oracle, she makes predictions for the future. So again, an altered state of consciousness, which has been induced by movement. Next. That's a picture of Potharaju. I've just picked this, and there are many online. I just picked this up because it's so vivid. And so let's take another example of Kavadiyattam. Kavadiyattam is again a ritual dance performed only by men. It is dedicated to Lord Murugan in the state of Tamil Nadu. And here it again a different element. There's a kavadi. Kavadi is like a burden. Actually, it means burden. And there's a bamboo stick which is balanced on the head by the ritual performers, and they have two pails at either side, which carries flowers, turmerics, etc., and as offerings to the god Murugan. And it originated in the town of Palani, and it's danced in a festival called Thaipusam. And there is of course dancing involved. There is again men wear bells around their feet. There's drums, so there's movement, coordinated movement and steps to the beat of the drums. And the ritual has its origin in a story about a giant called Idumban who carried the Palani hills on his shoulders in the form of a kavadi. The accompanying music is usually uduku, chenda, and sometimes nadaswaram. The songs are sung from a composition known as a Kavadi Chindu, written by a poet called Annamalai Reddyar. The dance becomes increasingly frenzied and the movements get faster too, and the challenge is to keep the kavadi balanced on the head. So if you've noticed, the common element even with Bonalu is this carrying of a burden on the head seems to be a very common element, and the test of the ritual performer to keep that balance, right? Next. So here's a picture of the performers. Again, there are many pictures. This is one version. There are many different versions of the Kavadi also, by the way. So it's obviously changed over time, but certain elements of the ritual performance have remained the same. Next, please. So I come to, we've talked about Desi, we come to Margi ritual performances, and I've picked the example of Vilasini Natyam because I'm a practitioner of that form, which has been revived and readapted, but I'll just briefly touch upon that. So, in India, ancient cultures, as with other ancient cultures, there was also a dedication of practice of dedicating young girls to temples as temple dancers, or devadasis, as they were popularly called. And this, by the way, is not restricted only to India. This thing of dedicating girls to temples, was practiced worldwide. It's not just in India. And in fact, even in Jewish culture, ancient Jewish culture, this existed. So, they were basically, the Devadasis belonged, they had many different names depending on the region of the country they came from. And they were a hereditary class of artists. Or ritual practitioners. So it was interchangeable. The fact that they were ritualists and then they were artists, this is an interchangeable function. And they were subdivided into various categories. So few Devadasis only were employed for the upkeep of the temple, to do the cleaning, to decorate the precincts. Some were singers, only singers, and some performed both as singers and dancers. And only a chosen few had the privilege of dancing in the sanctum and sanctorum. So many dance forms that we see today, for example, Bharatanatyam, which is originally called the Sadar Atam, Odissi, which comes from Kotipua, Maharis, these are resurrected forms of what were once temple dance forms. Vilasini Natyam, again, the dance form that I've learned and I perform, is again a readapted dance of the Telugu Devadasis. They were also called Sanis or Kalavantalu, or those of the arts. Next, please. Next. Sorry, just go back. I think I missed that slide. Was that? No, next one. Sorry. Yeah. So what were the rituals performed by the Kalavantalu? So it's interesting. The Kalavan, the Devadasi or the Sani literally was a mistress of the temple. So that is a role. That's where she becomes not a performer, but a ritualist, right? Exactly. Devadasis were called Maharis. So, like I said, different parts of the country, they had different names. So they would take on the role. So here she becomes a ritualist, where she's wedded to the Lord, she's wedded to the deity. So she becomes a mistress of the temple, which is actually her home. And so she treats the Lord and the temple as if it were her own home, and takes care of the affairs of the temple in such a capacity. So the chores and tasks were often, like I said, divided, and different categories of Devadasis would do different tasks, take on different tasks, like I mentioned earlier. And her tasks of the Devadasi were Nitya Seva, which is daily seva, daily service of the Lord, and Naimita, which is on special occasions. So this actually literally started with, waking him up, singing songs which were called actually in Telugu land called Melu Golupu, to wake him up. There are actually songs written where the Lord is sung outside the temple to wake up the Lord. And then Lali sung right at the end of the day to put him to sleep. So literally, like what a lady of the house would have to do to keep a house in working order is what she would do. As a ritual, the movements of the Devadasi while she's singing and dancing, because she would sing and dance, would be very simple and perfunctory. So again, there's no complex choreography here, because while she's doing the Nitya Seva and while she's doing all of this, she's only a ritualist, and she's not doing this for the entertainment or public consumption of people. Next. So what is the importance of a ritual performer? Why is a dancer chosen to be a ritualist? So we have seen in different ways that dance has been part of worship or the religious fabric of different cultures. You see, the thing is that the ritual performer becomes the very character. And I think movement aids that. Movement helps you because of the very nature of movement itself. It helps you to get into a state of an altered state of consciousness where you can become the character or the role you take on. And this is, of course, a very significant aspect of any ritual dance. So why? Because you need to become that character. And there can't be any duality there. So the duality between the awareness of the self and the God or the role being played has to be removed. So the ritualist, in effect, becomes the goddess or the god. And I would like to quote Dr. Thaneshwar Simalsingha, who's done fantastic work in this area of not on dances areas, tantra and sadhana, but he talks about the role of sadhana in rituals and the intimate connection of movement, gesture, and tantra. So inactive modes of expression, gesture, or ritual participation capture a breach of dichotomy inherent in the course of representation. No boundary between internal or experienced world and the world of external realities exists. So it is to remove that boundary completely. And that is why dance is such an important aspect of creating that space or that state of consciousness. Next. So in India, there has been various forms of yoga. You have yoga essentially means, India art is considered to be a form of yoga, and yoga essentially means union. So all Indian practices, any practice, any knowledge system, it is an endeavor for this union between Brahman, the universal soul, with the individual soul. So yoga also requires a high level of concentration because of this. So also is the case with art. So yoga is not like today. Yoga has become like, you put on headphones and you're doing some asanas. That's not yoga. Yoga requires a high level of concentration, and so is the case with art. Ananda Kumaraswamy says that art and religion bring about a similar experience, a view that has been held by other people from other countries like William Blake, who was a poet, Schiller, Schopenhauer, etc. In fact, we have two forms of worship. We have upasana and sadhana, where upasana may be considered as a devotional offering, like a worship, right, of a particular bhakti for a particular god or deity you're fond of. And sadhana is slightly more is a higher level where there's dhyana involved. It's a more evolved practice. And Indian art actually combines the two. There is upasana and there is sadhana intricately woven into the practice itself. So dance by its very nature creates a field of energy or a sort of sacred imaginary architecture that is by itself a ritual space. The idea of ritual in India is not necessarily connected with the people think that only temples. No, temples are not the only places where we think of it as rituals being connected to that space, but any consecrated space. That's why it could be a rock, it could be an idol, it could be a water body, tree, anything which is consecrated. And that consecration can happen with sound, can happen with movement, through mantra chanting, through singing, orchestral music, mudra, abhinaya, etc. Next. Yeah, so just to wrap up, there's a very interesting paper that I found by Rekha Tandon, who talks about the symbiotic relationship between dance and yogic chakras, and she talks about how when as a dancer you are constantly using the body to mark out various geometric patterns and configurations, which can be considered yantras actually. And yantras are consecrated spaces. So these tend to trigger the chakras in the body, and that is what she posits in her paper. And again, I cite Staneshwar Timal Sinha, who's done prodigious work in this area, connecting gestures and representation in tantric sadhana, and saying that shapes and phonemes are extremely important in tantric worship. So that is why dance is also a form of sadhana, kind of like a tantric sadhana. And triggering or awakening these chakras, as we all know, is one of the core principles of tantric worship practices. Triggering these chakras enables a mind. So why is it important? Because it enables a mind or the ego to lose its sense of individual identity and merge with the higher self, or what we call the Brahman or existential seer. As Tendon mentions, the idea of using the tools of tantric worship within the sphere of dance enables a body to be embodied inside out. I think that is probably the last of my slides. Okay, I'll quickly just finish with one example because we're probably out of time. So this is the idea. I mean, so this is what the reason why dance is so important in ritual performances. Interestingly, there is a practice among the Ikung tribe of the Bushmen of Africa who also practice a sort of trance-induced dance, which they believe leads to a state of ikya, which is very similar to the practice of Kundalini yoga or the tantric sadhana mentioned, which I've talked about earlier, which helps one achieve a state of supreme consciousness. The Ikung, in fact, call this energy lung, which they say is located in the lower regions of the stomach, for us the spine, and it rises up the body through the spine, which is not different from the Kundalini, like an electric current. That's what they believe. So this practice is common, like I said, it's not just in India, but it was in most pre-Abrahamic cultures. This was a common belief. So with that, I'd like to conclude my talk and leave it to Trishant to wrap up.
Thank you so much, ma'am. That was very insightful. I'd like to call upon Vishwa's founder, Ms. Shivani Mulapuri, to continue the Q&A session. And we'll also get back to the pop quiz during the Q&A question. Yes. Hello, ma'am.
My name is Pujita Krishna. Wonderful session. There's so many things that you have told us, which I'm hearing it for the first time. So before we move to the Q&A, I would now like to request the audience to take a 30 seconds to answer a poll for us. The purpose of this poll is to help us understand you a little better so we can better curate the topics that we bring to you. Please let us know in the chat box how you found out about WishwaTalks. If you are a WishwaTalk subscriber, heard about it through friends and family, or found out about the event on social media. Yeah. While you take the survey, I would like to express my gratitude to each and every one of you who've joined us today with your presence, And we really expect a very interactive session from each of you. Dance is not my subject, so I don't think I am the right person to ask the question answers. It would be great if each of the audience has at least one question, so that each of us in this audience can go away with a little more knowledge about dance. I extend my gratitude to our respected speaker, Ms. Pujita Krishna, for taking time to grace this event. A little bit about Wishwa. Wishwa is an online platform for everyday change makers and social champions. It's a crowdfunding and a crowdsourcing platform that is aimed at helping any one of you find the support you need in your efforts to fulfill dreams for yourselves, for others, and in the process, make our world a beautiful place. In addition to thought-provoking talks such as the one hosted today, we also want to extend our curiosity for exploration to our youth and young ones as well. We have launched 2 new segments in WishwaTalks named WishwaTalks Youth and WishwaTalks Junior to facilitate learning and important conversations in the minds of the new generation. If there's any one of you out there who's connected with schools and colleges who you believe can benefit out of these talks, please share the contact of the schools and colleges who are interested in us having these talks at their schools. We also have Vishwa materials. Imagine living in an economy where sharing is truly caring. And whatever you don't need, whether it be books, electronics, furniture, could easily be listed and picked up by members of the community. Vishwa Materials is a crowdsourcing platform designed to distribute materials to our local communities. At Hyderabad, we have distributed there are around 150 slums. Right now, we were able to distribute to 3 slums. It'll be great if there is more participation. All you have to do is list out your unused items, gently used items, call Vishwa. We generally do pickups at Ugadi and Diwali time. The idea is that nothing goes to waste. There is something for everyone. It's a crowdsourcing platform for local communities to list and exchange items all for free. Ugadi material campaign was a very huge success. The fundraisers that we have, we have the Vishwa Annadanam campaign. Generally at Hyderabad, at NIMS Hospital, we have been giving out food. What we have noticed is people from all over the country, whether it's from Assam, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, they come to NIMS for treating their family or friends. And when they come, they try to save that 5 rupees on food so that they can use that money on the treatment of the patients. Here, when we go there and we give, there is so much of acknowledgement about the quality of the food and that their hunger has been taken care of. It will be great if we could make this Annadanam campaign a lot more bigger, and we can give nutrition to the mothers and the children. That is one more area we would like to cover. It's not like people are dying out of hunger, but the thing is there's a lot of malnutrition in our country. We would like to work on that. We also have Srujana, cerebral palsy. She had cerebral palsy. Her principal of the school had put a fundraiser at Vishwa, and it was a very generous donation of an anonymous donor who gave an electric tricycle for this young lady who was dragging herself to school over 11 kilometers. And it was a very generous donation of his. And I would like each of you to share the fundraisers at Vishwa with your friends and family who can make a difference. We also have, all of us have someone or another in our families or friends in our circles who has a child who's a spastic or a disabled. And we know that parents, even in today's world, in India, are having to sacrifice their entire careers and lives in taking care of that child. Here we have Kanashraya Foundation at Rajmundry, which has been taking care of such children and helping them become independent. We also have Bal Vikas Education Society for disabled children who takes care of them and trains them to become independent. There is also another fundraiser called Donate Nutrition Food for Children Living with HIV and AIDS. In India, we have something called Annadanam. All of us think that we should do the different kinds of danam. Why not donate to these young children who are afflicted with HIV AIDS? There are around 2,300 children living in Hyderabad with HIV AIDS. And the lack of general awareness about HIV has forced these children with HIV into the worst form of child labor just to support themselves. To give back these children their childhood they've lost. The network of Telangana people living with HIV AIDS. This is a society which has been providing nutritious food to more than 100 such children every month. All it costs is around, I think, 2,000 rupees, if I'm not wrong. They give the packet which has the provisions for the entire year. Entire month. So it'd be great if a small amount of 2,000 can be donated for one child for an entire month. And the upcoming talks which we have are in ecology and environment. We've noticed there's very limited awareness in our country, in spite of COVID, in spite of the terrible summers we are going through, in spite of the floods we are having in Uttarakhand and all. There is still deforestation. There is still so much happening that we are destroying our environment around us. So we request that please attend talks on environment and share it with each and every one of you, your friends and family who has even a slight inkling or an interest in ecology. Our speaker is Utkarsh Upadhyaya. His designation is hydrologist, planning researcher. He's from the organization WaterAid India. The topic is empowering communities for groundwater management. It's on 29th July 2023 at 11 a.m. We also have Rahul Singla, who's the founder of Bachpan Save the Innocents, Understanding Gender Identity, on 12th August, 11 a.m. Then we have again our special speaker, Radhika Talati. She spoke to us about mudras last time, which was a huge hit. She's coming back to talk to us, giving an introduction to Kundalini on 19th August, 2023 at 11 a.m. With this, we will continue with our question and answer session. Ma'am, you spoke about Bonalu, and Bonalu just happened. What is the history of it? Why is it celebrated? And what are the regions it's celebrated in?
So I'm no expert. Like I said, I'm just researching this area. So I know just a little bit about these different practices. But from what I can tell, the Bonalu by itself is restricted to the region of Telangana, and it is practiced mainly, by people living in this area, and it is in the honor of the Grama Devatas, namely you have Yellamma, you have Mariamma and Mahankali. So there are about 5 or 6 goddesses in the honor of whom this particular tradition is practiced. And as far as how old this practice is, I really wouldn't know, but that is the what it is for. And like I said, this act of carrying the going in a procession with a burden, with offerings, etc., is what marks this particular tradition. Of course, the element of Potharaju exists in some parts. Potharaju is there, and like I said, this tradition has undergone many changes over the years. So it is practiced with variations in different parts of the region in Telangana. The Potharaju is particularly important in the Mahankali celebration. And yes, there is a rangam. In some practices, there is a rangam where the female, who is usually a yogini, usually from the transgender community nowadays, usually from the transgender community, they're also called Shiva Sattulu. And they get into a state of trance, and and then they foretell the future of what's going to happen in the state. So this was even practiced in Sikandrabad. I forget the name of the temple. Not Ujjaini, another one in Sikandrabad.
Mahankali one.
No, Mahankali is there, but there's another one somewhere close to YMCA. There used to be one. I don't know if they still do it. But there used to be a female oracle who would predict, what's going to happen. So this is that tradition exists in different with variations in different parts of Telangana. And like I said, it's called Bonalu here. It could have a different name in a different part of the country. But like I said, variations of this exist in different parts of the world too.
There's one question from Harivamsh, Mr. Harivamsh. Ma'am, why men are not so much involved in dance forms since ancient times like women did? Is there any cultural reason?
No, men were also very involved. Like I said, I mean, look at all the traditions where the act of dedication of women was only the female form, like for dedicating a ritualist to a temple. That was usually the girls because of the nature, the physiology. I'm guessing this is an educated guess, but I think it was mainly to do with the physiology that the women are much more susceptible to to act as mediums or psychic mediums as opposed to men. So the women achieve that reach a altered state of consciousness more easily than men do. So where that is concerned, where trance rituals are concerned, it is usually the women, but it's not as if men were not. Actually, men were very, very much a part of many dance cultures around the world. I gave the example of how bishops and deacons used to be part of dances. In fact, they would lead the dances, the choral dances. So they were. It's just that over a period of time, because we've become such an androgynous society, and that's again a Western import, that men don't dance became like a very modern thing. And that's changing too now.
One statement from Ms. Tanushri. Why people are so shy in dancing? Why don't they see it as a very important for health, physical, mental, spiritual? I have my own wellness center where I use lots of music with Sanskrit slokas, kirtan, and bhakti dance, but I feel much awareness is needed. I'm a music therapist too.
That's a very good question. Why are people? Well, I think it's the innate inhibition that most people have with anything to do with the body. We are, as people, we are very, very uncomfortable with body. So even when we have to speak, when you ask someone to stand up and speak, they're very unsure as to what to do with their hands. They don't know. They don't. And the awkwardness is very palpable. So there is a basic, unfortunately, as people, we become very uncomfortable with our bodies. And that is probably why people are shy. The body is considered to be, well, we don't have Indic view is not as anti-corporal as it is, say, Abrahamic traditions are. Yet we have a fear of the body. And unfortunately, that has come into and seeped into our culture too. And that needs to go first. We need to embrace our bodies first, feel confident in our own skin. And then, you don't. So this shyness has got to do with this discomfort with the body. That's what I think.
Very interesting perspective. So one question from Ms. Radha. Do the women in Bonalu really get possessed and dance, or it's just acting? I'm curious to know.
Again, I have not researched or done any research intensely into Bonalu per se. But I think that if the ritualist is chosen, again, like I said, there are many variations now. A lot of people are doing it as it's become highly commercialized. There's a lot of DJ music used in some places. But if it's done the way it is supposed to have been done, where I think like some temples like Mahankali and all these places, they're very particular. There is an oracle, I believe there's a lady called the Amma. I don't know if she's still there, but I read an article about how this lady was chosen when she was 22. And in fact, she fell ill all by the sudden illness took her, and there were like markings on her body. Now, some people may believe it, some people may not. Those who are scientific may question it, but it was unexplained. Even the doctors couldn't explain why this phenomenon was happening. Ultimately, it was found that she was chosen to play the role of the oracle, and she has continued to do so. And a lot of people, if you go into those regions, you find that these people actually even have weekly, they have sittings where people will go to them for questions, for asking solutions to their problems, and for predictions. So it's not a science. It is something that is beyond the realm of what we think is scientific, right? If you look at everything within that limited framework, then obviously you'll have to push your credibility a little bit. So to answer your question, I think if it's done the right way, then I definitely think that it is not fake. There are people who do go to that state. But if people are doing it for the sake of doing it because it's, bonalu, it's fun, if that's the attitude, then well, there may be people. I'm not denying that there are fakesters out there, but just because there are a few fakesters, you can't rubbish an entire tradition.
There's one question from Mr. Shmuel Erushaimi from Israel. So I'll just read out once and I'll let him also ask the question. What role of ritual dances in the life of poor and low economic, socio-economic groups of population around the world? Thanks. Yeah. I'm going to ask him to speak. Can you unmute?
Follow the question. I have to repeat.
What is the role of ritual dances in the life of poor and low socio-economic groups of the population around the world? Yeah, let him answer the question. Please unmute him, please.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Here's Shmuel. Okay, I want to ask you what, according to you, role of ritual dances in the life of poor and low socioeconomic groups of population in Africa, in Asia, and another poor places, traditional places.
Again, what is the role of dance today or ritual dance today in all these parts of the world? I am not in a position to answer or give you an intelligent answer to that. My guess is definitely the ritual has nothing to do with economics. It has nothing to do with how affluent you are. In fact, the more affluent you are, the more away you are from these practices. In fact, my understanding and my limited knowledge, at least in India, you find that the primary participants of these ritual practices are those who are from the slightly more economically, slightly economically challenged classes of people. They are not well-to-do people, yet they participate in these rituals because of the faith is a very, very, it's a term that I don't, it's loaded, but it's what they believe in. And because it is their access to something higher, a higher realm than the mundane, than what they have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So ritual practices have their own importance. Economics has its own place. I don't think the two are connected.
Can I say something here?
Yes, please.
When we were young, we used to go to temples, or, some aunt would put some ritual saying, today we are having this bhajan happening, that bhajan happening. And recently, my sister had put a bhajan in her house. And when we had gone there, we realized while singing along with the lady, all the emotions, the pent-up emotions as women that we have, or the men that we go through, as we're singing, it comes out. Our emotions are freed. There is a lot more, it's like talking to your friend. When you when you sing loudly, when you dance, these rituals help us free up our emotional suppressions. I think that is what my experience was. Shmuel, would that answer your question? Please mute him.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much. I very enjoyed to receive your elaborated answer. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Okay, there's one question from Mr. Ranjit. How to add dance as part of child education?
How to add? Well, there are like so many opportunities today as opposed to how it used to be in back in the day. I do think that there's a lot of awareness now, and parents do want to encourage their children to start to learn some. I mean, at least when I was growing up, it was mandatory in our family that you learn, if you're girls especially, you learn some, art like music and dance. So I think in some communities, in some cultures, it is very much part of their culture, the way they are. And also I think in schools now it's become mandatory in some, like I think CBSE schools and ICSE schools. Some schools, it is mandatory part of their curriculum. But the question is, what kind of dance are we teaching them? I find that in schools today, the emphasis is there are dance teachers, but it's always relegated to the bottom of everything. Like the priority that is given to the arts and dance, especially, is right at the bottom of the list of priorities. So that is one. Secondly, the generation is being raised on a very, very shallow understanding of dance. That is why I wanted to do this talk, because dance today is what we understand from what we see on television and in popular culture, which is, if you're doing something fantastic, like you're standing on your head or you're doing triple turns, or it's a very Western idea of a very athletic culture. And something that, absolutely stuns us or has to visually gratify us, only then it is dance. So when we have that kind of a very, very shallow understanding, then that itself is problematic. So what we need is a community that is aware of the different shades of something as potent a medium, an art form or knowledge system as dance. And then we start teaching the young. That's what I think.
May I add something here? Of late, my observations, I was seeing a lot of Bollywood dancing being encouraged, and some of the YouTube videos of IITs and colleges showing dance in one of its most dirtiest forms, and people whistling to it. Somewhere we are aping the West. We are forgetting our culture. When I go to Japan and then they talk about the tea ceremony, it takes years to master the tea ceremony. In India, we did have households who encouraged art, whether it is dance, whether it is music. Whatever we did with bhakti, we did with a lot of faith, we did with a lot of, as if we were doing a puja. And a kind of culture came out of it. Art was a part of our lives. Today, it's no longer a part of our education. We're removing the beauty that India had. Children today are educated, but the education which can come from learning a dance form or a music form or an art form, the senses, what do you say, Trishant? What is your observation on this aspect? What is it that the child can learn from this kind of an education which is missing in our education forms? What is your opinion on that?
I believe somewhere, so dance teaches a lot about history, about expression. Through expression, it teaches us a lot about history, about the deities we follow, about the gods we follow. So automatically it does make you more connected to your faith, the faith that you follow. And I feel they have to be given that connection initially when they're younger. Like when I was a kid, I used to visualize Shiva as my hero, and I still do. And for me, he's the creator of all art, all forms of art. So that connection keeps me interested in all forms of art, whether it be singing, dancing, or sketching. So yes, ma'am, you'd like to add something to it?
Just adding to what you pointed out, in a very valid point, is it is intimate. It helps a child connect to the culture, to the belief systems, to the stories, especially a culture like our culture, right, which is so diverse. So it can be very bewildering for a young child to know all the stories. How do you tell a child all the stories? The best way is through music and dance, because dance is nothing but a storytelling tradition in its simplistic form at a simplistic level, it is a storytelling tradition where you tell stories, and that's how you kind of inform the people, educate them. And as a performer yourself, you're also becoming in a different setting, you become a ritualist because it gives you that kind of space, right? Or state of consciousness. So definitely it is one way of educating the child, is to kind of, like you said, stories from itihasa, stories from puranas. And a child who has had some training in dance will be aware of some of these stories, some of these precepts, as somebody who has never learned Indian music or dance.
Uh, I'd like to just add one thing I've noticed. So in India, we have this dance. I mean, there's this Taiyam dance from Kerala. There's a ritual called, there's a procession in which Yakshaganas are the performers, and we have Bhutakola near Mangalore, Tulunadu region. And when they're performing, they're vibrating like really at a high frequency, like they're possessed.
Yes.
What I've noticed is there is a lot of similarities when it comes to extremely modern high tempo music. They have similar vibrational frequencies like trance or psychedelic music or anything like that. They have the same vibrational frequencies, and people are actually possessed when they are listening to that music. Like, yes, ma'am.
Fantastic point. But what's the difference? What's the difference? See, the thing is, when you can have that same altered state of consciousness with cocaine also. Right?
Yes.
The point is that the purpose?
No.
That's not the purpose.
Yes.
For us in our Sanatan Dharma, the idea is whatever you do has to be for a higher purpose or a higher, it has to be submitted to the universe of the Brahman, or you could be to your favorite deity, but it has to be, you are only a conduit. It cannot be for your personal happiness or personal pleasure. If it's for momentary personal pleasure, then the value of that state goes down, because you're not channelizing it for something to raise your level of consciousness.
It's every artist would want the art to take the audience to a higher vibrational frequency, and not a substance taking them to the higher vibrational frequency. That is what most musicians or dancers would want their audience, that they go into a trance by just.
Yes. So there is substance abuse, which is absolutely the lowest level of altered state of consciousness.
True.
Then there is current day music and dance, which is like everybody gets into a state of when you're doing in a rock, which is all very well, because it's giving you that high, but it's only giving it to you for that moment, but it's doing nothing to your raising your level of consciousness, because you're keeping it there. It's only your pleasure for that point in time. It's very limited in its scope. But when you use the arts to raise the level of consciousness, not just for you, but the people around you, for something which is higher, then you are also raising your level of the kundalini, so to speak, or the chakras get more this thing. So you're raising the level of consciousness, for want of a better word. I mean, it's a more spiritual experience. It's not just for your personal pleasure for that particular point of time. It's a different experience of rasa.
In fact, it was very nice. I was not able to articulate myself, but when you said, it is to raise the level of consciousness. Education is all about raising the level of the child's consciousness.
Yes.
And we in India are aping the West and forgetting the beauty of our own culture, our dances, our music, our traditions, our rituals. And we are not giving the opportunity to the next generation and making it a part of their curriculum. It is more as, okay, after studies, if you have time, you do.
Yes, exactly.
which is removing the opportunity for generations to come. This opportunity.
Yes.
There is one question from Ms. Tanushri. Yes, can you unmute yourself? Yes.
Hello, ma'am. Thank you for such an enlightening experience. Myself, ma'am, I'm a doctor, right? So I interrupted. I'm so sorry to interrupt. But, I'm a doctor. I'm an anesthetist, right? And now I'm into spreading the word about spirituality. So, some people think that I'm foolish, right? But I know how important it is, because the crux of each and every study is finally, the final aim is spirituality itself. All the different kind of studies, whatever it is, whether it is medical, engineering, aeronautics, whatever, the final aim is raising of our consciousness, and of course, the mukti or moksha or whatever, the spiritual connotation. I mean, this is what I think, and this is what I'm doing.
Wonderful, ma'am. I'm glad you feel that way, because even in the Gita, for those who follow the Gita or at least studying the Gita, in the second chapter and the third, which is about karma yoga. What is karma yoga? Essentially, it's not just doing. People think karma yoga is I will do what I have to do, what I'm supposed to do. Well, it is that, but it is also submitting it. So after every puja, you say kayena vacha manasendriyerva buddhiryatma praकृtit swabhavat karomi yatyat sakalam parasmai narayaneti samarpayami. So you're saying everything that I do. When you do your puja, your prayers in the morning, you're saying everything from waking up to taking a cup of tea, to sweeping my house, to doing those everything, going to the like say you're a doctor, treating patients. You do all of that. You do it for yourself, for your family, for the community, but ultimately everything is for Narayana.
Right.
So that is karma yoga. That is karma yoga. To say I'm doing my job, I'm a karma yogi. No. You're doing it. If you're doing it for personal aggrandizement, that is not karma yoga.
Very, very rightly said, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you.
Miss Neha, would you like to?
Hello, ma'am.
Video?
I'm sorry, actually, I can't do that. I'm in my early 20s, and since childhood, I've always wanted to dance. And classical dance has been like the thing that I would want to do, like my inclination is there. So, and like today, I have been searching for a lot of good, either I would not say good teachers, but a good place to start.
Right.
But before that, after the talk today, I would like to incorporate, I would not say ritualistic dance, but the deeper understanding that you talk about. So how can I do that?
Self-study, svadhyaya. That's what I do. When I started off learning, I didn't know all of these things. I didn't, we all attracted to something because there are some vasanas within us. I mean, not everybody likes dancing. There are only some among us who do. That means you already have some impressions from your past life that you still have that kind of proclivity. So when you have that proclivity, you start small, wherever it is, and then keep learning, do your own study, find out, and make it your own journey. But it's going to take a while. See, the problem today is that we're very impatient as a society, as a community. Again, why blame the West for everything? But well, it is true, because we've become very impatient because of these Western notions that we have to succeed, we have to be successful. So there's a lot of that comes from the outside world, and social media doesn't make it easy. So we're constantly impatient for instant gratification. So whatever journey you start on, you want to become good at it immediately, so that you can make that. Everybody wants to make reels, everybody wants to be, well, that's another side of it. But be patient, because anything that is as vast and as deep, and a knowledge system like Indian classical dance traditions or dance traditions by itself, they are not going to, it's not going to come to you in a day, in a month, in a year. It's going to take a while. So if you're ready to give it that kind of time and make it fruitful in its own journey, everything need not have some tangible outcome. It shouldn't be that after 2 years I'm going to write a certificate exam, I'm going to get a certificate. After 3 years I'm going to be a diploma holder. Well, it's good to have those milestones, but sometimes process of learning should be for itself, not that you want to become a doctorate or a PhD or So start the process, start it.
Next question from Ms. Ina Kurkul.
Yeah, Reena Turkal. I want to say that dance forms I used to love childhood classical dance. So I have done the classical dance like Kathak little bit, But because I don't know, because of some circumstances, I could not continue. But I was very fond of it, and I wanted my daughter to do that. She did it till eighth standard. After that, because of the influence of her friends who were in Bollywood, the beats and all that, I told you.
Yes,
Yeah, really, she changed her mind, and
I
she's
know.
lost. I don't know now how to make her understand that that was really very good. The Kathak, she used to do that. Bharatnatyam, Bhagavad Gita, she used to read. And we are into spiritual organization also. So we do many such things like teaching Mahabharata, all that
Yes.
all that shlokas and dialogues and all that. We are in Bal Vikas of Maharashtra. So we do all that for children also. So I wanted my also daughter and my children to do also things, my son and my daughter. But I don't know why they have stopped it. How to bring them back, I don't understand.
That's a tough one. That's a really tough one.
And I want to teach also. I want to do that seva to teach others also that you have to have some classical background. Without that, you can't live. I have experienced that.
So I think, I mean, maybe Srivani Garu can also pitch in. If anyone, who is a parent and probably has had the same experience, may also offer their advice. As somebody who's been a teacher, I think it's very important to keep giving those kind of inputs to the
Yes.
children, because this is a very critical age, seventh, eighth, ninth, and this is the time when they start seeing the world and they have their own ideas about what the world is and how they want to interact with it. So yes, it is tough how to, but I think the idea is to keep persevering and to keep giving them those inputs, not to let go. Of course, at the same time, you don't want to be pushy, but you have to create an environment which aids it without being too forceful. So I don't know how that can be achieved, but yes, to understand what they're going through, to try and at least show them that I understand that you like hip hop. I see the beauty in it. I see this. But hey, look at this. Can you tell stories like this through hip hop, or can you?
So,
So it has to be a mixed approach. If we are always only saying no, 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 no this, no that, then I think that also is kind of, it sort of has a backlash. Be
I
that
don't know, but it is very difficult to make them understand. Nowadays, children, they are all always on the mobile, and they get, I think, more knowledge from there than from the parents.
absolutely,
They are very influenced, more influenced with them than us. And whatever we tell, they think that no, it's
you
irritating.
don't know exactly.
Yes, and poor unpad gawar, what all that words they use.
I think it's very sad because we have to create. See, it can't be just your job, ma'am.
Yeah,
Unfortunately,
that's true.
it's the whole environment and the ecosystem that they're a part of. The schools also create that kind of pressure. The children come from an ecosystem where they're told that if they're doing something traditional, if they're doing a puja, then they make fun of children who are doing that. So the ecosystem, unfortunately, has become so toxic. So it can't be one parent's job. I think all parents, all people, teachers, the whole community has to decide that change has to come about. It's going to be tough. Unfortunately, I don't have a solution to give you
Yeah,
right away.
No,
that's
you
true.
have you have said a very important point about the ecosystem in our country needs to change.
Yes.
I have 3 children, and when my daughter was having her children in the US, I was heartbroken. Somewhere I realized an entire generation we have failed in giving them our identity.
True.
Our history has not been taught to them. The knowledge of our ancestors, the struggles of our ancestors, the beauty of our culture, we have not been able to pass to the children. So I do endeavor, like you, to share with them. And I do face the same resistance that Ms. Nina is facing. But I'm also a little bit of a follower of Tao. I also believe that we should allow children to go their path. Each child, each human being, as per our dharma, we feel will definitely will be put into circumstances to grow, to go through their path, to love and learn and groom in their path. All we need to do as parents is to create a vision for them, create a possibility for them, create something that they can work towards. That is one thing. Another thing that I do is I add when I'm actually when I cannot give it to my children, I give it to others around me. Please keep the spotlight of Miss Nina's, please. Yeah. I give you want your child to learn Kathak. Your child is not learning. If there's somebody else out there who wants to learn Kathak, help her. Think she's your child and you give. And what I have noticed is when you give, you get the fulfillment, and also you're putting it to another generation. My child might not learn Kathak, but if there's another child who's learning Kathak and I'm supporting her, another generation at least is going to have that skill. Today, there are hundreds of dance rituals, music, which are going extinct in our country. I may not be able to get my child to be interested in this. But if I can get another child to be interested in this and support that child, at least that dance ritual is not going to disappear. That's my what I can share with you.
Yes, thank you. I will like.
Sorry?
I would like to teach if I get a chance.
Yes.
I'll really do that. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
May I just add just a little information for those who are young parents? There is a wonderful forum called Hindu Parenting. I don't know who is, if you want to check it out. I think Ranjit ji, you did a talk for them. If he's still around, I don't know if he's there. But Hindu Parenting is a wonderful forum which has a lot of these material and resources that you can avail, podcasts and things like that, which you can use. If you have young children, it would be a wonderful resource to have.
It's available on YouTube. How do we
online? I think Hindu Parenting is online. If you just type the words Hindu Parenting, something should. I think it's a website, or they have YouTube also, and they have podcasts. So I'm sure they have various resources.
They're on Twitter and Instagram. I'll just post the links in the chat.
Yes.
So there's one question from Ms. Surabhi Chawla. Could you please mention the name of the person who ma'am quoted for the connection between Tantra and movement and
Dr. Sthaneshwar Timalsina. It's Sthaneshwar Timalsina, Timalsina. He runs a very, he's an acharya, and he follows a tradition called the Sarvamnaya, which is a combination of Tantra and Vedanta, very rare combination. It used to be a common practice, become very, very remote and very rare. And he's one of the practitioners and an academician. So that's again a rare combination. Usually you have academicians who pursue it as a scholarly study, or you have only practitioners, but he's both. So he's an acharya. He has his own stream of disciples, and he runs an organization called Vimarsha Foundation. Please look it up online. You can, and there are courses for free, and it's beautiful what he teaches. It's called Vimarsha Foundation, VIMARSHA, Vimarsha Foundation.
So there's another same question from Ms. Harita Kunakala. I have Nina's how Nina, kids have importance of Natya Shastra and how you make them, motivate them. So you can take them to different places which are showing these Natya Shastras. You can take them to the performances. You can take them to Konark, Hampi, and show them along with their friends. Because, if you just take two kids and you tell them, you see this, they were not going to. If you can make a camp, take them on camps which are actually talking to them about the dances and all, it would be great. In fact, Vishwa is coming out with a section called camps, to have people who understand temples, for example, who can take these children for camps and explain what the temples are. Or Trishant is actually presently working on that right now. Okay, there is our next
Can I
question.
also say one more thing here? I think it's important. Unfortunately, it's come to that. But it's important to make these things cool also. Cool as in, I'm using a very modern term. Make it attractive for them, make it sound like this is something that they should be doing. Like make it aspirational. So, for example, when you talk about classical dance, ababo, they have a very fixed notion of what classical Indian dance is. So you have to first, yes, educate them. You have to educate yourself. Take them to performances. Make it aspirational. You should tell them stories like, what? There are people abroad who are dying to come to India and learn these art forms. In fact, Isadora Duncan and Martha Graham and all these big names in modern dance, they wanted to learn Indian dance, and they have taken a lot from Indian dance movements and incorporated in modern dance. So when you tell them these things, it becomes more, because unfortunately today we look to the West for inspiration. You have to tell them, we are the original source. They have taken from us, and it's a fact.
Ms. Guru Srimati, can you please unmute yourself? Yeah.
Namaste. First of all, Pujita being online is no reason to be missing anything. I saw her name and it was understood. I'm also a great fan of J. Sai Deepak and Sanjeev Sanyal. So connected to this, I just had one thought to what one of the audience members mentioned. I feel a little bit of it is to be blamed when the education system keeps calling it co-curricular or extracurricular.
True.
I think if, of course, certain schools are getting aware, it's another thing what kind of content they choose to put in their books regarding dance, because I was briefly teaching in a school and then the dance started as a bit of classical, and then it was, the authorities wanted something more fun. And so I think whether it's the pay scale of dance teachers or the interest for children, where the word co-curricular, extracurricular essentially means that it's okay if you do it or you don't do it. Of course, there's nothing that I could be contributing to that. That will be something like, the reason I said Jay Sai Deepak and Sanjeev Sanyal, because like our history has to change in our books, our outlook needs to change overall in the education system. If it all comes into your books, children understand it's important and they need to do it. My query was, Pujita, you mentioned a very nice thing about the lunar, the effect of the moon. So from whatever little bit I've read, I had this query that could there have been some kind of a thing, whether our ancestors planned it so, or whether the lunar effect and the ritual dancing happening at that time, maybe something is beneficial on a spiritual level or something like that. I don't know. I thought maybe if it was connected like that, like we always say, our festivals and what we eat at that particular time is scientifically correct. So maybe this dance and lunar, is there some kind of a thing, is just what a query I had.
Could be. I mean, again, I don't know if there's a direct connect between dancing, movement, and the effect of the moon. I don't know. I haven't read anything that connects the two. But definitely the moon has an effect. The waxing and waning and the cycle of the moon has an impact on the female body. That is for sure. And that the moon has, why the moon is considered to be the lord of creativity is because of this kind of, this nature of moon, which is very, changing. It changes, right? There's the form of the moon keeps changing. So the cycle of the moon is definitely connected to the female body, and it has an impact on it. All planets do. It's not just the moon. So, for example, that is why astrology is considered a science within our knowledge systems. Vastu Shastra or palmistry or astrology. It's all considered a shastra. It's a science. It's a study. Because all planets are supposed to have an effect on our body. Now, does the moon have an effect on the movement? I'm not very sure, but I'm sure it will. There must be some connection there for sure.
It's amazing that you have brought this connection. I never knew about it. I never knew there was a connection between the lunar.
That was a lovely thing that she brought up when and she mentioned about the Minak and who would have thought?
No, but ma'am, for example, unfortunately, we've forgotten all these things. And
Yes.
today we laugh at these things. Now, even in my generation, when I got my attained puberty, we practiced my mom, although we were posted in the north in Jodhpur, some of the practices, like I was put on a certain diet. I was
Like I had an entire puja. There was a whole puja thing that happened, and there was a particular thing you had to eat on that day. And
exactly, you don't eat spices. You keep sattvic food only. And even today, when you have your period, you're required to, your body has to get its rest. So there's a brilliant book by Sinu Joseph Ji who's written on menstruation and the myths around menstruation. And this is not just India. That is what we think. We say, oh, menstrual segregation, temple nahi jane dete, Hindu culture so backward, women are not allowed. No, it's not discrimination. It is, I mean, now that they're a little, I mean, since you brought it up, the reasons are varied, and primarily among them, it's because the body is going through a very dramatic change. So when that change happens, all your energies are moving downward. The flow of the energy is downward, it's not upward. So you should let that happen. When you go to a place which is spiritually alive, you go to a temple which is where the murti is spiritually alive, right? It is fully consecrated. It's going to have an impact on your energy system, and you will have an impact on it. That is why you're not allowed to see. We have become so gross in our thinking that we only think that what we see is what is. There are energy fields all around us. We don't think about it today because we've been taught by Western education not to think about it. But all our traditions and practices were geared towards that. That is why you shouldn't be doing yoga, doing pranayam when you have your cycle. You should be abstaining from these practices because your body is undergoing a certain change, and the energies are in a downward motion. That is why you feel a little low and all of that. That is the effect of what's happening. Now, why that should happen? That's happening. It is how nature created it.
And since you're an authority on the Vilasini Natyam, the ritualistic dances, as you mentioned, which are connected to Vilas, is there something very distinct about those ritualistic dances as to compared, in the other which we would watch? What would be the most distinct quality?
So I learned Vilasini, which is this is a name that has been given to they didn't call it Vilasini Natyam. The Telugu Devadasis didn't. They just call it Bharatam Pattadam. So they didn't have a name. This was
sorry, what was the word they called it?
Bharatam Pattadam. Pattadam means to do it. Bharatam is the Shastra of Bharata Muni. So, there is no name. Vilasini Natyam, my guru gave it after she put it together as a dance form. But yes, it is definitely. I don't know how it was, but I'm thinking in most southern parts of the country, it would have been similar with some variations. So the Sani, the Devadasi, in a temple, would, like I told you, would do the same in her Nitya Seva, which is her everyday service of the Lord. She would start with waking up Melukuluku, waking up the Lord through song, with some minimal gestures. Gestures are always used in ritual performances. And like I said, you should read the paper which Vimal Sinha ji has written on the importance of gestures. So, Melukuluku. Then there is something called the Bala Bhogam, where the breakfast, the first repast, the first meal of the day is offered to the Lord. At that point, the dancer will do some basic kind of a performance to entertain the Lord while he's supposedly enjoying his first meal. So you see, the Lord, the deity, is not disconnected from you. The deity is actually the cosmic, the body. He embodies the cosmic order. So for us, the body is a microcosm of the macrocosm. It's an exact same replica of the universe. And Virata Purusha, the deity, is supposed to be the form of the Virat. He's a Virata Purusha. So that is the connect you have with him. And so then she would do all of that. Then after that, then, afternoon you don't, because afternoon the Lord is supposed to be taking rest. Evening, again, the Lord opens up, he's open to devotees. When that happens, there is another ritual where the devotees who come to watch may also watch the dancer, the Devadasi, do the ritual. Then there's something called Baliharana. Baliharana is a rite which is performed to the Dikpalakas, the 8 Dikpalakas around the temple. And again, the dancer would accompany the priest at every, like you have the Garuda. If it's a Vishnu temple, then you have Vishnu, Garuda, then Brahma, then there are 8 Dikpalakas, Nairuti, Vayu, Varuna, and all of that. So you do all the Dikpalakas, they're the guardians of the temple. And again, the Vishnu Paddhati, Vishnu temple Paddhati is different from that of a Shaiva Agama. Two different. So some variations, but they're different. So a dancer or the Devadasi would accompany the priest every time. In fact, even today, when you go to these temples and when they do their annual, the Naimita service, like that, they do their annual celebrations of the temple, the priest will go to these designated points, and when he chants that Churnika, or what he says, what is said at each place as an offering, as an oblation, he says Nritta Samarpayami, or Geetam Samarpayami. Even when you do your normal archanas and pujas at home, they say Vadyam, Geetam, Nrityam Samarpayami. We don't do it anymore. It's become only in name. We just don't do it anymore. In the olden days, when they say Samarpayami, there would be melam, there would be music, there would be dancing.
A question: when did the Britishers remove the Devdasi system? From which century or which decade?
1946 or 7, it was banned.
But when did they start losing their contribution to the temples? Is it after 1947 or prior to 1947?
No, so degradation in the form, it's a good question. The degradation in the tradition started before that.
How many centuries was it?
There was a huge movement against the Devadasis for a good 100 years, 150 years in spurts across the country. Because of the British education, the Victorian morality, and all the Western notions of, the Christian notions which were important into our culture. And it was made out to be something that is evil, and all of that as a bad practice, as against women, as exploitative of women. And eventually it was banned. So it was a movement that took place, I think, at least for
You're from Andhra or you're from Karnataka?
Telugu.
So in Andhra, if you see the Tirupati, the Kalahasti, if you see all the temples, there's so many temples across Andhra. In your opinion, which decade were the Devdasis disconnected from the temples?
Very difficult to say, Andy.
Approximately.
It would have happened way back, but interestingly, my Guru Garu, Swapna Garu, when she was doing her research in the early 90s, there was still a sizable surviving Devadasi community who were living in places like Pitthapuram and, East Godavari, West Godavari belt, where this practice was even until the 20th century, it was practiced. And they still lived, they were there, except that they were disenfranchised. And that's how she met some of those surviving members, and some of them, some of her her gurus whom she learned from, like there was a lady called Madulla Lakshmi Narayan Garu. She was, I think, in her late 60s or 70s. She was the youngest one of the surviving Devadasis. She actually got a special permission. So they used to get the special permission to dance only on special occasions. So they would have to get that approval from the government or the authorities that, hey, look, I'm from the community, but I want to do this because it's my art, and I want to. How sad is that? Okay, taking permission. I want to do this because they were banned. If you were from the community, you couldn't dance. So you had to get a special permission and say that, okay, on this occasion, I would like to do it here. and I want permission to be able to offer my services, offer my this thing. So certain asanis, certain devadasis were allowed to do that occasionally after a period of time.
So obviously the sarkars have come in the Nizam's period, but the Telangana area was not under the Nizams, under the sarkars.
No.
So how did a change come in the temples in the Telangana region?
Because of the Nizams.
Nizams also followed the same processes that the Britishers.
The culture, the Islamic culture became the norm, right? It became, there was no patronage for, who were patronizing the temples? Let's come to that. Where did the Devadasis get the kind of, you see, the system was what it was because of the patronage of the king of that region. Like the Vijayanagara, for example, the Vijayanagara kings had a thriving community of Devadasis. In fact, I think a huge bunch of them traveled in Orissa, in the temple, Jagannath temple. There were about a huge number of, about 10,000, a large number of women. There's still an inscription there at the temple. Only Telugu Devadasis were allowed to sing in that temple.
Okay.
So it was obviously the patronage of that king because the temple was the socio-eco-spiritual center of every village or of that particular area. And it was the king's responsibility and everything grew around it. The commerce grew around it, spirituality grew around it, everything grew around the temple. Temple was like the locus, right? And so that's why. So obviously, when the Hindu kingly traditions vanished, naturally patronage also vanished because Devadasis were rich, very rich. They were not exploited. At its most pinnacle form or pinnacle state, when it reached its, I would say the 15th or 14th or 15th centuries, where temple building was such a frenzy. Temple building became so like the Cholas, and after that, till the 16th century, the Vijayanagaras, Kakatiyas, they really got into the whole temple building activity, and that's where the Devadasis became so important, as important element of employed in the service of the deity. And they were very rich because there were lands given to them where they would settle, and their job was only to do this. So their job was to pursue the arts as a knowledge system in the service of the Lord. They didn't have to go to offices to work or look after husband and children and look after. They were not women from the domestic household, so they were allowed to. In fact, Devadasis were the only women who were allowed to be educated.
When did the temples get into the hands of the governments in Andhra? Any idea?
I think in the, as soon as 50s, 60s happened around.
Prior to this whole system came from the Britishers. The Britishers are the ones who put the executive officers at all. So could it have been in the 1800s? Could it have been in
the endowments? Maybe you're right. Maybe it predates, but this endowment thing doesn't exist in certain other parts of the country. It's only mostly in the southern parts that you find the endowment department, right? It's only the southern temples, because the southern temples are the richest.
So if by grace of the temples are freed from the government clutches, is there any hope for the Devdasi community to come back and claim their rights on the temples?
That's a very good question. I don't think that is going to happen, not in the same way that it was then, unless we have to see generations changing for that to happen. And in the current scenario, with the way the world is today, the way it functions today, to have the same system or a replica of what used to exist may not be possible. But what can be done is like we used to do when there was a temple in Hyderabad called the Ranganatha Swami temple. Under the guidance of our Guru Swapna Sundari Ji, we used to, during their annual processions, we used to live in the village, in the temple for about 7-8 days. And for those 7-8 days, we would do the rituals along with the priests because we were trained to do it.
It's amazing. So the one question from Mr. Harivamsh: neuroscience of dance is another aspect which gives some logical reasoning for next generation to get into dance forms, stress relief or cure for some issues personally. Okay, another Mr. Surabhi Chawla: how far are the current Indian classical dance forms from the original teachings in the Natya Shastra?
No, very far. Very, very far.
Mr. Harivamsh: ma'am, I knew some girl sisters and friends, and their parents are also not encouraging some people who love dance in traditional or other form because there is no economic benefit in future. What is your opinion on that issue?
Very, very contentious topic, Andy. Well, you should learn, definitely learn, because it helps you be a better personality for the reasons that we've discussed so far. Whether you want to take it up seriously, professionally in the future, that is a risk and a gamble that each individual has to decide for themselves. Because yes, it is not like how it used to be in the olden days where the temple took care of your financial needs. Like I said, the Devadasi was a very rich woman in the olden days. She didn't have to worry about where the next meal is coming from. But as an independent woman today, dance is not putting food on my table. Maybe if I teach dance, then again, like Sushma ji mentioned, then I have to go to a school which will say, well, we're having an annual function. Pujita ji, isko aap classical mat kariye, bring in some Western element, isko thoda aap Bollywoodi bana dijiye. That will put food on my table. But is that dance as I learned it or as I want to do it? So it's difficult. It's a challenge.
One question from, what you said was really poignant. It's a little sad, but that's the reality of today.
Yes.
One question from Miss Surabhi Chawla: are there any good courses on Natya Shastra that you would recommend?
That's a very good question. Courses on Natya. So I think what you should do is there is a professor, a scholar, Dr. Bharat Gupta ji. In fact, I did a talk with him also sometime back. He's a scholar and he is an expert on Natya Shastra. And I think if you look him up, Dr. Bharat Gupta, he has also given talks on the Natya Shastra on YouTube. So just subscribe to Dr. Bharat Gupta, GUPT, Bharat, BHARAT, GUPT.
One statement from Mr. Ranjit: the Devdasi system, though is still in existence in rudimentary form, but with social activism, state governments of different states at different times outlawed this ritual, such as Andhra Pradesh Devdasi's Prohibition of Dedication Act 1988 or the Madras Devdasi Act 1947. The practice of Devdasis was banned during British rule, starting with the Bombay Devdasi Protection Act in 1934, and Jogani system in Telangana is similar to Devdasis. Yeah.
So, even movies like, for example, I just wanted to add that, movies like, what was that movie that came out recently, which became a huge hit, which was about the Devadasis? Telugu movie, which was a huge hit. I'm forgetting the name. Which is about how the Devadasis.
Sam Singha Roy.
Sam Singha Roy. No, everybody said, oh, it's a wonderful movie. You must watch it. You must watch it. And I can't tell you how disgusted I was with the portrayal, because it is so one-sided. It is so prejudiced, because the priest is always shown as this evil. The Hindu priest is always this evil, exploitative figure. The Devadasi is always this poor, harassed creature. So this narrative has to change. This narrative is something that is so ingrained in people's mind that we think that, oh, Devadasi, she was exploited. No. Okay, there may have been instances. I'm not saying the history is long. The diverse, people around the world. There may have been instances when there's a power structure anywhere, there would be instances of exploitation. Nobody is denying that. But to say that it was a systemic thing is absolutely wrong. They were not exploited. They were rich. They were powerful. And they were educated. And they were sophisticated. They were not an abla stree who was being exploited, sexually by the priest. Nothing could be further from the truth. We should not give credence to such movies. And we do it because we don't know our own history. That's the sad part.
My understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong. when the Britishers had come to India, they wanted to exploit India for trade reasons. But to explain to their own nation why they are here, they said we came to convert them into Christianity to make them more civilized. And we saw that we have a very strong culture, and the entire community is getting its strength from the temples. Whether it is a mental health problem, whether it's a financial problem, whether it is a community issue, people came together at the community center. The temple was a community center, and people came there, and we had an ecosystem which took care of every single sect in Hinduism out there. So they wanted to break the temples, and the temples were extremely rich. Every temple which was built had thousands of acres, lakhs of acres to them.
Yes.
So they wanted to break the connect between temples and lands. The Devdasis managed the temples, just like any woman managed her home, the Devdasis managed the temples. So they wanted to break the system of the Devdasis to get a control over the lands. This is my understanding. Please correct me if I'm right or wrong, or if
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Andy. That is so when they make it today, the narrative is that the Western countries, especially like who are the main colonizers? British, French, Portuguese, and the Spanish people.
Dutch.
So the Dutch, yes. So these were the people, and most of them are Catholic countries, right? So there was in fact something called the Papal Bull, which was issued when these countries went out exploring. The idea was economic exploitation, yes, but the Papal Bull made it very clear that they wanted conversion of the people, because that was one of the main precepts of Christianity, is to evangelize and to proselytize. So British not so much, unfortunately. That's why a lot of people say they're the better of the colonizers. I disagree, but well, in a sense, you see what happened to the Spaniards, what the Spaniards just did to South America, what the absolute mayhem the Spanish conquistadors, and what the Portuguese did in Goa. I mean, it's horrible. So the definitely one of the aims was conversion, no doubt about it. And they realized once they came here, it was easier to do in countries like in South America, but they couldn't do it, and they couldn't break the Hindu traditions and the dharmic system so easily. So they had to find devious ways to do it. And definitely the Brahmin became the fall guy for everything. Oh, catch the Brahmin because he's the guy who holds the knowledge. Make him the evil one, break the tradition, break the temples, and then you can, basically when you have more fault lines created within a tradition and a system and a community, it's easier to convert them.
Prashant, you had something to say.
I'm good. I was just bringing up a question from Sylvie Chavla. Do mudras have a science of their own, and can we practice the standalone? I'd like to tell Sylvie ma'am that we've done a webinar on mudras a couple of months back. You could check it out on YouTube channel and also on our website. This will allow you to understand how mudras works like a closed electrical circuit in our body, and how yoga emphasizes on it in a different way than the dance forms that we follow. So in dance, it is used as a form of expression. In yoga, it is used as a form of healing and exercise. So that's about it. Lastly, I mean, that was a wonderful round. I'd like to thank everybody who's brought up such wonderful, pertinent questions to the speaker. And with this, I'd like to conclude the session for today. Lastly, I'd like to ask everyone to take a moment to subscribe to WishwaTalks to get alerts on every new and exciting talk that we're going to have in the future, exclusive events, and access to the Wishwa community. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn for future updates. Please do follow Feet on Earth and Pujita Krishna ma'am on Instagram, Facebook. Thank you again. See you next Saturday. Pujita ma'am, I'd like to request you to join the breakout room.
I would like to thank everyone from the beautiful WishwaTalks team that has been so efficient. It's not easy to do this so seamlessly. So Trishant, Srivani Garu, thank you for the opportunity. Trishant, thank you for being so dependable, so efficient, and so sweet. And Preeti also. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Pujita. Wonderful talk. So many things that you spoke, we didn't have a clue about. And thanks to all the participants. It's actually 1 hour after the call talk, and you're still here participating fully. Thank you so much to all of you. And thank you to the Wishwa team. Wonderful work all of you all are doing. Thanks.